The situation at the Texas-Mexico border, specifically at Shelby Park and Eagle Pass, has been a flashpoint for the nation, as the federal government is insisting that it has the right to undermine the state of Texas in their efforts to stem the tide of a flood of illegal aliens crossing into U.S. territory. Texas Governor Abbott, has been implementing measures to deter unlawful border crossings, which included the installation of razor wire and the deployment of Texas National Guard and Texas Department of Public Safety to the border, while at the same time kicking out federal border patrol agents because they were continuously sabotaging measures to prohibit entry, like cutting razor wire, under the guise of apprehending migrants and rescuing those in distress. Now, in response to the growing standoff between the state of Texas and the federal government, the Supreme Court recently sided with the Biden administration, ruling, at least temporarily, that federal agents could remove the razor wire Texas placed at the border. However, the Supreme Court didn't rule on whether or not the state of Texas can continue to set up new razor wire or continue to keep the Border Patrol out of Shelby Park. And do you know what Texas has done since then? If you guessed, the state of Texas has told the federal government that they can pound sand and have continued to lay down even more razor wire and has not ceased in keeping out the Border Patrol from the disputed park, then you've guessed correctly. In a statement, Governor Greg Abbott wrote that the federal government has broken the compact between the United States and the states. The executive branch of the United States has a constitutional duty to enforce federal laws protecting states, including immigration laws on the books right now. President Biden has refused to enforce those laws and has even violated them. As Fox News reported on this matter, Governor Abbott argued that the failure of the Biden administration to fulfill those duties triggers a clause in Article 1 that, quote, reserves to the state the right of self-defense, end quote. And the governor noted that he has already declared an invasion to invoke the authority which he calls the supreme law of the land and supersedes any federal statutes to the contrary. And the governor went on to express confidence that the state will prevail if the case is heard on its merits. And he said, I think maybe we will get it to the Fifth Circuit on its merits where I believe we can win. And I do believe when it gets to the Supreme Court, we can win. No one knows what the justices were thinking at all. All we know is they wanted to send it back to the Fifth Circuit. Now, Abbott also said that the Biden administration has broken the compact between the federal government and the state of Texas as laid out by the Constitution. As he put it, included in that agreement was the compact that the federal government would take care of the states, and Article 4, Section 4 of the Constitution speaks to that and says that if the federal government does not take care of the states and the states are in danger, we can ask the federal government to live up to its obligations. Then the authors of the Constitution knew there would be times when the federal government would not live up to its duty, and so they empowered states in Article 1, Section 10, the right of self-defense. And he went on to say that Texas is asserting their right in Article 1, Section 10 of self-defense because the President of the United States is not fulfilling his duty to enforce the laws passed by Congress that deny legal entry into the United States. Now, when the governor was asked if he would instruct Texas law enforcement officers to physically prevent federal officers from accessing the contested part of the border, the governor said this. He said, Texas very simply is securing the border. There are criminals coming across our border. Texas has a right, as a state, to stop criminals from coming into our state to make arrests of those criminals. We have a National Guard, as well as Texas Department of Public Safety officers who are there to make those arrests and to deny illegal entry. In response to the governor's actions here, the Biden administration is now demanding that Texas bend over and grab the ankles and give up Shelby Park by January 26th, or else. And at the same time, Democrat lawmakers are starting to crop up, urging the Biden administration to simply take over the Texas National Guard by federalizing them, effectively stripping the state of its power to defend itself. Representative Castro, a Democrat from Texas, Beto O'Rourke, a Democrat running for governor in Texas, and other Democrats have joined these calls, including Representative Lloyd Doggett, who represents areas near Austin and San Antonio. They are all arguing that if Governor Abbott continues to defy the Supreme Court ruling, President Biden should just establish sole federal control of the Texas National Guard. Now, obviously, this would be an extremely dangerous move for the federal government to make here. The federalization of a state's National Guard against the wishes of the state's governor is a significant authoritarian step that would almost certainly lead to legal challenges and possibly much, much worse. Now, the state of Texas isn't entirely alone here, at least verbally anyway. There has been over a dozen states that have declared that they stand with the embattled state. For example, among the public statements put in support of Texas, we have Governor Mark Gordon of Wyoming, who said that Wyoming stands in solidarity with Governor Abbott and the state of Texas in utilizing every tool and strategy to secure the border and protect American citizens. We are all border states now. Then you have Sarah Huckabee Sanders from Arkansas, who said that if President Biden won't defend us, states will have to defend themselves. Arkansas stands with Texas. And Governor Ron DeSantis of Florida also got into the act and put out a video on Twitter X and said this.
Biden is going after Texas, saying that they must remove fortifications from their border. They put wire, they put things to keep people out. Biden's saying you got to take that down to let people come in illegally, which is just crazy. And I remarked that if the Constitution was originally understood to mean that a state could not protect itself against an invasion, that the federal government could force a state to allow an invasion, the Constitution would have never been ratified in the first place. Texas would have never joined the Union when it did. And if you look at Federalist 46, which Daniel Horowitz pointed out, James Madison talks about situations where federal encroachment can be mitigated by state action. So you have Texas here that's holding its ground. They have every right to fortify the border vis-a-vis an invasion, and that's Article 1, Section 10 of the Constitution. So they're in the right. You also have a situation where liberal jurisdictions over many, many years have been sanctuary jurisdictions against enforcing federal immigration law. So you'll have somebody who's a criminal alien, they will not be given over to ICE, and they will deliberately act to frustrate the laws on the books, and somehow that's viewed as okay. You have Texas, who's acting to enforce the laws on the books, to ensure that they have a secure state and that we have a secure country. So all of this is just nonsense what Biden's doing. Texas has every right to stand its ground. In Florida, we've been sending people to help for many years now, because we understand it's not just a Texas issue, it's ultimately an American issue. And if we don't have sovereignty in this country, then we're not going to be a country anymore. So they have every right to hold their ground, to stay the course, and Florida will continue to be there helping out every step of the way.
Now, all of this support is well and good for Texas, I suppose, but unless the states take action beyond verbal support, the state of Texas will remain a lone bastion against the federal government that is not only refusing to deal with this overwhelming crisis at the U.S. southern border, but also is actively participating in hamstringing any attempts to stem the flow of illegals crossing the border. Now, all of this, of course, begs the question, why? Well, we know that the Democratic Party has indeed been expressing great interest for creating a pathway to citizenship, which is just a fancy way of saying amnesty for illegal immigrants currently living in the United States. This has been a consistent part of their platform for years, with various proposals recently being put forward by Democratic lawmakers in both the House and the Senate. One avenue, for example, that the Democratic Party is attempting to use to sneak this in is some Senate Democrats are trying to slide in amnesty to border security and tightening of the asylum laws. Now, why would they do all of this? Why are they so concerned? Well, what we do know is, according to a 2021 Gallup poll, 56% of Hispanic Americans identified as Democrats or leaned Democratic, while 26% identified as Republicans or leaned Republican. This Democratic advantage among Hispanic Americans has been consistent for well over the past decade. And now we have a recent study by Yale-affiliated researchers using mathematical modeling on demographic and immigration operations data, and they are suggesting that the actual number of illegal immigrants could be much larger than previously thought, potentially as high as 22.1 million. Even with conservative estimates, the study found a population of 16.7 million illegal aliens in the U.S. These figures are debated, but considering the millions upon millions of illegal aliens swarming the border recently, those numbers don't really seem all that surprising. So perhaps then the whole point of all of this is to create a generational shift in power. If the rates of voters of Hispanic descent were to maintain their current trends, for example, since 2012, the Democratic Party has received no less than 59% of the Hispanic vote, with numbers reaching as high as 70%. If amnesty were granted to these 22 million illegal aliens, the Republican Party would never again win a presidential election in our lifetime. This would give the Democratic Party enormous power to wield their agenda going forward. and the country as we know it would most certainly change forever. But regardless of intent here, the state of Texas is taking their stand, and we of course here on this channel will most certainly be watching what the state of Texas and the federal government do next. And that, my friends, will bring our episode to a close once more. From the Topical Umbrella, I am Adrian. Thanks for watching, my friends. I'll see you all next time.